This is Mission Qualphone, a monthly podcast that takes you inside the workings of our company, but not just the ins and outs of business. We look at the ideas and insights that make Qualphone truly unique. As a company, we are committed to being the best and making each person's life better. Join us as we get to know and learn from people from across the organization. What's their story? What have they learned? And how do they live out Qualphone's mission? Welcome to Mission Qualphone.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Mission Qualphone podcast. Hello, Jerry. How are you?
Hi, Marisol. Another episode ready to be unleashed.
I'm excited. I'm super excited. I was a huge geek when I was growing up. I love sci-fi. So we have our Chief Information Officer on, and I like to geek out without geeking out. So
Right.
I'm excited for that conversation. But I wanted to talk to you before we get into the interview really quickly. Okay, so have you ever had a moment? For me, it's moments where you. Okay, I'm not gonna have a lot of grace for myself right now. If
Okay.
you said this about yourself, I'd correct you. But have you ever had moments where you just sit down and you're like, "Oh my God, I am the dumbest person in the whole wide world"?
That's a regular occurrence for me. Yes, absolutely.
So, as your friend, I would want to say, that's not true. Obviously, look at the data, blah, blah, blah. Don't believe that. That's a limiting belief. Okay, but that just happened to me, and it was in relation to the podcast. And those moments happen to me a couple times a year where I'm just literally dumbfounded by obvious, like blind spots, I think is the nicest way I can put it. So let me get to the point. So when we started the podcast, first of all, however many podcasts we have, how many downloads at this point, I think we reached a level of legitimacy a while ago. I was chasing 100,000 downloads because I felt since we weren't going to run ads and that wasn't a way to measure success, it was that number. That's just the number that I had dialed in.
Right.
We reached that number, and I put out there that my intention was for the podcast, I would really want it to help close a deal, for us, for Qualphone, to employ more people, to bring more people to this organization. Like, I thought that's why I'm doing the podcast. And that's who I'm chasing. That's the audience I'm chasing. So I'm at work doing my thing. You and I are working on a different project for the company. And I get a ping from one of our production agents, and it's about the podcast. And I think I shared it with you. And then I get another communication. And then it starts to dawn on me. You and I have been talking about our YouTube. The volume on the YouTube is very high. And we don't know. We don't know the data. We don't know who's listening. And it starts to dawn on me that our own production agents are listening to the podcast and getting something from the podcast. And what I've also learned is what they get is so absolutely unique to whatever it is, whatever episode speaks to them. I've had people who have commented about the episode with Jim, and you, about both of you speaking about going and finishing your degree later in life. And I didn't realize you don't know when you put something out there, how it impacts people.
Right.
So I had this moment of such utter clarity of I'm chasing these numbers for something. I don't know exactly what's going to make this successful. And it just dawned on me. It's that's my audience. That's the audience for the podcast. That's who we should want to speak to and share all these wonderful things about our company. And so I had that moment.
That's great. No, I think that's great. And I think that's I don't know why you thought, why that is a dumb moment. You said you thought you were being dumb, but
it should have been from day one. I should have thought that made that connection that. I think that talks to the paradigm shift in my head, at least, or I feel it's more universal, but that corporate mindset of closing the deal, making money, success, KPI, to this, which I think our mission does so beautifully, this more of this mindset of be the best version of yourself, like we say, or help people or serve people or do things for a greater good than profit.
Right.
And again, I need to add, we are a for-profit company and a great successful one. But that the reason I felt I had that moment of like, was very hard on myself was because I am so grateful for every employee that listens to the podcast. It's a weird dynamic, working in corporate and having a podcast, because you don't want to ask people like, hey, did you listen to this podcast? People are listening to it. It's being used effectively for a couple different uses, and so thank you. So I'm very emotional about that.
That's great, and it's really cool to think that hey, there are employees, there are agents that listen to this podcast and get something out of it. I think that's really cool. I think that's awesome.
The one that, and you've noticed this too, they'll say, they want to be anonymous, like they don't want us to say their name, but it's a very difficult job, regardless of what logo, what account you're working on. They're like every job. You can have a bad day, but it is a job. And so to hear from an agent saying that our podcast puts them in a good mood for the week, and even if they want more, it was like, it was just very touching.
That's great.
On that note,
well, today I'm really looking forward to our conversation, and we have as our guest our Chief Information Officer, Prashant Cherukuri, and Prashant is very, very visible. Is that a word I can use? And Prashant, you just have to hear us talk about you for a minute before we officially bring you on. But we hear Prashant talk a lot, and I kind of alluded to this before we started. I am not a technical person. I can't explain to you how technology works, but I am a benefactor of the technology that we have. Podcasting is a perfect example, right? I mentioned to Prashant that I'm kind of a hobbyist musician, and how when I was a kid, you'd have to save up all this money to buy some piece of musical technology you wanted. And now it's really inexpensive, and the technology has come so far. And so I'm one of these people that really enjoys the technology, the benefits of technology, whether it's the things we do at work or the things we do for fun. And this is a wonderful time to be alive and enjoy the technological innovations that we have. And so Prashant works in that world. And I think that's really cool and impressive, because I don't understand how much it works. I just know that I like it, that we have this. And so I'm personally really looking forward to having a conversation with Prashant today. Prashant, how are you? Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Marisol, for having me on the podcast. Glad to be here.
Prashant and I actually worked at a same BPO that I'm sure was acquired many years ago by someone I don't even know, back in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I always think of that company and Qualphone. Those are like kind of my alpha and omega in the BPO space. And my first account, Prashant, back then was beta testing cable lines in like some fancy Beverly Hills in California. I remember it was just, that was the technology. My interview back then, my first interview with Mike Morrow, one of the questions was, do you know what Yahoo is? And for anyone who's listening, that 18 to 25 market, or anyone who's listening who's not as old as Prashant and I and Jeremy, we are of a generation that was before and after Google. So from a technological perspective, that's what I want to talk to you about, Prashant. But before that, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been with Qualphone and how long you've been in the BPO space and how you got here?
Absolutely, love to. So obviously, I was born and brought up in India, but I came here to the US to pursue my dreams. I got my degree in electrical engineering from University of Florida. And most of my buddies that I went to school with ended up going to the West Coast, building operating systems, designing the next generation chips. And I just moved down to South Florida. I just had come down here for I think like a vacation or something. And I just fell in love with this place, like the people, the food, the diversity. So after finishing college, I moved down here, drove down, and started working for a company. And then after 10 months, this was a large company. It wasn't too exciting. I joined a startup, and I was there for a good 12 years, wore multiple hats. I was their first employee. I was, in addition to all the technology related stuff, I was the front office admin, accounting for a little bit. And also, they were a database marketing company, and they went on to become a call center. So we actually did some tech support, customer service work. I actually had to get on the call to do some tech support. And that's when I realized how hard that job was, to actually be on a phone all day. I found a lot of respect for this industry. And as that company evolved into BPO, that's how I stayed on. I was there for a good 12 years, grew to about 3,000 agents worldwide. And then after that is when I joined this other company as the VP of apps. So that's the company that you and I worked at, Marisol. Was there for a couple of years, was managing their overall application architecture. And then for personal reasons, I wanted to move back to India to take care of my aging parents. And I was there for a good 10 years. And that's where in India is where I feel I had a life transforming journey there. So I joined as the CIO of a BPO company there, working night shift. So now I understand exactly what how our folks feel when they work late nights. Just working with just diverse teams across multiple geographies, and help the company transform from a pure play BPO provider to a technology company that actually built a SaaS-based customer interaction platform. That was very, very interesting journey. And then in 2016, kids had grown up. Children wanted to come back to the US to go to colleges. I was looking at coming back, and this opportunity with Qualphone just came across, fell in my lap. And then I've been here with the Qualphone since 2016, about almost 6 years now.
Okay, so can you validate for me the difference of a company? It's sort of like what I alluded to in the intro. There's this, I feel like back in those days, and I'm not judging a company or the time, I'm not judging anyone, but back in those days, it was so much about getting clients, keeping the clients happy, and employees, production agents. It was a number in a box. And I think the thing that Qualphone is, and other companies, I don't want to disparage other companies, but what Qualphone does so amazingly well is this each person philosophy. And I think that's like a big shift in from working from these two different companies.
When the Qualphone opportunity came to me, right, I had not heard of Qualphone, honestly, at that time, right? So you start doing the research, get a good website, and we talk about all. And then there's something called this is our mission. We had a chief mission officer. I had no clue what it was, right? So coming from a corporate background, typically you have head of HR or people office, and that's about it, though, right? So it doesn't hit you. And most of the time, at least for me, what I do in terms of service is outside of work, and that work is work. So that's how it has been in the past. But, after coming to Qualphone, I was trying to understand what this is, right? It took me some time, right? My first meeting was, I think in October, we all met down in Monterey, met with the chairman, met with the people. It was interesting that during those board meetings, the amount of time we spent on, the usual, the business stuff, the finance, the profitability, but also on the people side. What are they doing? Initially, I said, whoa. Okay, this makes sense, right? This is really good. And then 2017 January, perhaps Jeremy, you were there. Then this was the San Antonio summit. That's when you start seeing some of these things in terms of the stories that you hear, the shining star awards. Oh my God, you get emotional in those, and how some of those activities, and when we heard what we were doing in the communities. Amazing, right? And you start absorbing these things and say, wow, this is real. And then finally, I had the privilege of going down to Quatrocinegas later that year for a ceremony. Oh my God, that was just, the word is enlightening. I said, wow, I am so glad I'm here. I'm so happy that this company not just talks, but lives and breathes what they say. And that's when you get a real feel of what this mission is about and why we want to work so hard to actually make sure, the company is successful because we have this mission that we want to fulfill. So I didn't mean to go off on a rant, but I thought that for me, it did take a while for me to really get my arms around what this mission is and how we as individuals, how we as employees can actually, can participate in this broad vision that our chairman has, and including the leadership team.
I totally relate. I think I've told the story a few times. I think I was here like 2 years, and I always had the same question, like, well, why doesn't, like, I didn't understand.
Yeah.
And then it was at the summit in Mexico, and it was actually where it was at that moment of the opening prayer of how inclusive they were for so much of my life. I was an atheist, and so to have a moment where I saw the inclusivity of like Hindu and Jewish faith, and they were trying to include everyone, including non-believers, and just that's the moment I was like, oh, that's when I got it. And I think that it's like popcorn. It pops for people at the time it pops, and. Yeah. But I've never felt like this at another BPO space. And I'm not trying to insult any other BPO space. I'm just saying that the mission that our chairman has to improve the lives of people, it's a different desire to work for that than to get up to do a job.
Absolutely.
Prashant, one of the things that we always talk about in any conversation about technology is how it changes so rapidly. Things that we are just used to now didn't even exist 5 and 10 years ago. And now they're just, you can't live without them, right? So one of the things that we notice about you is in this world of technology that is constantly changing, how do you stay grounded in, what do we call it? The shiny object syndrome. There's so much changing. There's so much going on. You're probably getting bombarded from vendors trying to sell you stuff, the latest new technology. How do you stay grounded in the stuff that's really the most important and the thing that, how do you prioritize all that? How do you minimize all the noise, all the distractions, all the bells and whistles in technology, and stay focused on the stuff that's truly important?
Yeah. Excellent question, Jeremy. Excellent question. Not an easy one too, right? Because as you correctly said, there is so much new technology and it's ever changing, right? So the first challenge is just culling through all the information to understand what is even relevant to what we do, right? Yeah. There's so many things out there, right? So first things first, you got to figure out, who do you believe, right? And what do you want to believe, right? So what I've done is actually identified a couple of sources, right? I have a certain set of newsletters that I subscribe to, certain blogs that I read, that I trust this credibility. I also rely on my network. I've been in the industry for long enough and I don't know it all. And I have a few folks that are in my network and technology that I trust, and we trust each other. And whenever there is something out there, we share, right? We believe that the collective knowledge of all of us is better than one single individual. So there is no easy answer, Jeremy. So it's a combination of a lot of reading to understand what is relevant to what we do, a lot of culling through and say, look, can I apply this now? Is this bleeding edge or is it cutting edge? And also looking at if somebody has used it and they've been successful, is this something I can do? So it's a combination of those things. But the most important thing is to not go after the shiny object and to actually look at what is relevant to what we're doing. And will this really make an impact to what we do or how we do stuff?
Prashant, to piggyback on Jeremy's question, the shiny object, you answered that brilliantly. But there's also the sense of calm about you that I've experienced. And that is not something in this fast-paced environment and things coming up constantly, all the technological needs requested of your department, you just have such a pleasant persona. Like, I remember the first time I met you, I think you had a bow tie that was glowing.
Flashing, that's right.
Flashing. So what's the secret to the, you're very balanced. You have a very balanced energy about you, which is so, for the position you have, I just find that such an interesting opportunity to practice calmness, I guess. I don't know.
First of all, I thank you, Marisol. I appreciate your comment. So, what you're perceiving as calmness, I think, is just my personality to listen first. But many times I've seen this, and I've learned this the hard way. The technologist is too eager or anxious to get to the solution, right? You jump to it and you say, okay, even before you've heard what your customer has to say, first things first is, I try to listen, and that probably comes out as me being calm, number one. And number two is, most of the time when folks come to tech or me, right, they have an issue, right? I have some friends that call me even without issues, but most of the time they come to me with problems saying, look, how do I solve this? So I think, by calming down itself is going to give them some reassurance or confidence that, no, I'm talking to somebody that can solve the problem for me, right? So it's merely what I've learned over the years, and I've had some good mentors. It's just the more I listen, the more I think the customer is able to articulate the problem better. And I try not to jump to a solution. I try to listen in, and that's, I believe, has helped me really get to build those relationships or rapport with the customer or my stakeholders.
That's, the sad thing is that that's such a groundbreaking thought, to actually listen. And not react. It is. It's true. I mean, it's like, oh, that makes total sense. But I also Rolodex back in my brain, that comparison to past CIOs, and there may have been a lack of listening a lot of times that created that feeling of chaos, maybe in the IT world, not in, as a department, just that there was always so much going on. But is it really hard for you not to buy a bunch of shirts that say, Google it? Because I just, I feel like you're, is John Batchelor, did I pronounce his last name correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I really one day think I need to get that shirt for him, because he probably wants to tell me that all the time. Google it.
But Marisol, it actually works both ways, right? Because there's so much information, when people ask me questions, they already give me the answer, right? Because they've Googled it, they've seen it. I said, okay, if you think that's the way to do it, go ahead and solve it that way. So it actually works both ways, where Google sometimes, can be real help, but sometimes I think there's overload information where you don't know what to do. So I agree with you that Google can work both ways.
So Prashant, a question that we ask often of our guests is, what advice would you give to someone starting at Qualphone in production? Maybe they might be interested in information technology, maybe not. What would you want to impart to any agent who might be listening?
Sure. Again, we've learned a lot of these things the hard way, so I'm going to think through some of these. Number one is, especially what I've realized, Marisol, is there's no shortcuts in life, right? You got to put the effort in if you're really serious about getting to where you want to be. So first things first, they got to be ready to put that effort in to get there. No shortcuts, right? Number two, in tech, again, from experience, is be approachable, right? End of the day, I feel that people will respect you, will come to you, will endorse you if you're approachable. I understand many times tech folks don't want to be disturbed, but it's the other way around. They should be approachable. I think that would really be a differentiator if somebody wants to get into technology, that they will help them. And, growing up through the ranks, I told you my first real job was first employee. I learned so many things by wearing multiple hats. I really begin to appreciate what others do, right? As opposed to just knowing tech and just being a programmer or being an admin. So I would also recommend that they be open to taking on additional responsibilities. That way they really get the feel for what it takes to do their jobs. So, right. And I think that's what makes one better in terms of helping others or serving others. And then, do the best at it, right? At the end of the day, sometimes you're given a smaller scope, sometimes it's a very large scope, but you have to find a way to give the best to what you're given. Doing it, halfway there without your heart in it, I don't think is going to get you somewhere. But whatever it is, whether it's a high-end architect job or testing job or a desktop support job, all of them are important and they got to give their 100%. And finally, don't lose your sense of humor. Things can get hard. Folks are usually screaming at you when things are broken, but don't ever lose your sense of humor. Otherwise, this line of work is going to be hard for you.
I think that's great life advice. Don't lose your sense of humor. Because life, I think, is just from your first breath. It's kind of set up.
Yeah. One of the things that I've really enjoyed since becoming part of Qualphone in 2014 is the fact that we are a global company, right? I, every day, am on calls with people from all over the world. And if you would have told me 30 years ago that I would be working for a company where I am literally on these magical video calls where we see each other, something we saw on the Jetsons when we were growing up, I wouldn't have believed it. And it's awesome. And I love that about our company, that we are truly a globally diverse company. And there are lots of folks in our leadership ranks like you, Prashant, that maybe weren't born in the U.S. You live in the U.S. now. You mentioned going back and spending time back in India for a number of years. And for someone like me, that, all I know is my experience living in the U.S., I'm always interested in what your personal background, the fact that you have lived in different countries, what does that bring to you as a leader, do you think?
This needs some thought, right? Because it is not easy, Jeremy, as you said. It's not easy because I personally, even though I was born and brought up in India, to be honest, I struggled the first year, 2 years when I was there, Jeremy, right? The cultures are so different, right? The work culture, let me put it that way, the work culture, right? When they say yes, it's actually no. When they say no, it's actually yes. So it's I think one as individuals, as employees, as leaders, we have to find a way to understand the cultural differences in these geographies. It's not easy, but unless you make a genuine attempt, Jeremy, I think it's going to be hard. There's always going to be that gap in terms of you trying to tell them something, they hear it, but you're actually not communicating the right way. So again, my guidance or suggestion there is, I think you have to understand, the more time you spend understanding the cultures, the more one-on-one time you spend, I think that's the way you build those relationships, and that's the way you understand what goes on. And as I mentioned, I have a lot of appreciation for the folks that work nights because I've been there myself. I know what it takes, what sacrifices one has to make. So when I actually set up a call at 4 p.m., let's say our time, and it's 2 or 3 in the morning in your time, I know what it takes to actually have somebody get up at that time and be on the call, right? So I just think being sensitive to their cultures, their needs, I think will help in terms of us being better managers or leaders in such a diverse company like ours. I feel it's a privilege to be here, Marisol, right, at Qualphone. I start with at the top, right, the chairman who embodies, humility and servitude. You see him, wow, it's just amazing. And then you have Mike Morris of the world, absolute laser sharp focus on execution, right, on getting things done. He's got like the perfect path and a clear line of sight of getting things done. I said, wow, amazing. And then you have Doug Kearney, the consummate leader. He brings the best out of everyone. Roberto, what can I say? We just need more people like him in the world with so much love. And all my peers, Jassy, Walter, Jim, Marco, they're friends, they're mentors to me. I'm really, really fortunate to be surrounded by such a wonderful team. And the team that I have, right, all my direct reports, I feel very fortunate that I have a great team. They understand the mission, right? And they know that everything that they do, everything that their team does actually contributes in a small shape or form to the mission. And I feel really privileged and grateful to be in this role.
I think we're very lucky that you're in this role. So thank you. So Prashant, one last question. I like to circle it back to the mission is how do you see it within your department? How do you see it taking flight?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So from a tech perspective, you understand we are kind of limited by what we can do, but I've never let that stop my team though, right? I tell my team, while we cannot control all the outcomes, but we can definitely execute on the responsibilities that are given to us, right? For example, when people say downtime, they talk about, network outages, power outages. But for me, what I tell the team is, look, if an employee or an agent can do their job, that means they can take calls, it's downtime, right? It is impacting their ability to pursue their vocation, in turn impacting their supervisors and managers and eventually the company. So they have to relate it down to that employee's ability to do their jobs every day. Similarly, I can give this example for, reporting. How does it impact the mission? Absolutely. If we don't provide accurate reporting for our managers, then that means they can't make informed decisions on what they need to do, what they need to act on. So it's just as important, right? So like that, what I've told them is, look, do what you can, relate it back to how this impacts the customer you're serving, and in turn, how this impacts the mission. So that's how we've kind of distilled or translated what this mission means in terms of how we can embrace it in what we do every day. And obviously, beyond that, we participate in all of the mission activities, the fun at work, learn at work. But from a day-to-day what we do, Marisol, I've tried to get this message to the team on how they can contribute in their own way to the grander scheme of the vision that we have at the chairman level.
Well, Prashant, thank you so much for joining us. It was great to be able to sit down with you and have a conversation. And I really enjoyed it. I'm always impressed when I can talk to people who actually understand technology instead of just, need it and use it all the time. But thank you so much for joining us, Prashant.
And I thank you for coming on and sharing your story and for your great leadership within the company. And I love the fact that we're of an age that we were alive to see this evolution of technology, and that that you're the leader taking us into the future with that. So thank you so much, Prashant.
Pleasure was all mine. Thanks for having me.
Well, Jeremy, I knew Prashant was going to be on the podcast at some point. Like, we don't have a schedule of when. I mean, we do have a schedule, but we don't have a set
agenda.
It has to be
it
has to be every department or every country. Like we really kind of go with a natural flow, and sometimes I feel like the way it ends up happening is exactly the way it's meant to happen. And so I was so looking forward to this conversation with him. He is the chillest CIO I have ever worked with. Thank you, Prashant. Thank you to everyone who's listening. Thank you, Jeremy. I'm super excited with this new gratitude of hey, we have an audience to go try and win over, and that's our own production agents. And for all of them that are listening, I know, Jeremy, I can speak for you. We all are so grateful for what you do, and also, of course, for listening to the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks, Marisol. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mission Qualphone. Remember, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Mission Qualphone.